On the 18th of November 2013, an incident occurred on the border between Southern California and Mexico that later made headlines across the United States. It cost the country's government $1 million, but that wasn't the highest price paid for this event. At around 6:20 a.m., a young man appeared on the cameras at the U.S.-Mexican Customs. He was confidently heading towards the so-called simplified inspection lane, intended for those who cross the border several times a day. For example, this simplified inspection is for people who live in Mexico but work in Southern California for various reasons. However, this particular guy especially caught the attention of the Customs Service. His name was Cruz Velazquez, and he was 16 years old at the time. He told customs officers that he was going to visit a friend for a couple of days, but the Customs Service was very interested in his bag. As a result, the guy was asked to undergo an additional baggage inspection. During the inspection, a customs officer noticed that the young man was becoming seriously nervous. He kept looking around, and a certain tremor appeared in his voice. This seemed far too suspicious to the customs officer, and he decided to send the guy to officers who conduct in-depth inspections of belongings and interrogate suspicious passengers. The officers on duty that day were Torian Perry and Valia Rebirth. First, they checked the guy's documents, and they had no questions about them. Then, they proceeded to inspect the baggage. Officer Baird opened the young man's bag, and inside, besides his clothes, were 2 bottles with some kind of liquid that aroused particular suspicion in the officers. Every year, a huge amount of narcotics is smuggled into the USA from Mexico, including by couriers transporting them under the guise of something legal. Shortly before this day, the Customs Service had received information that cartels might be smuggling methamphetamine in the form of powder dissolved in liquid. The officers suspected that this was exactly the case. However, the young man claimed it was just apple juice. So, officers Yadrin Perry and Valia Rebirth decided to deviate from the official protocol and play the guy's game. According to protocol, if drugs are suspected in liquids, food, or similar items, the Customs Service must confiscate the suspicious items and conduct a rapid test for narcotics content. But instead, the officers, with smiles on their faces, suggest the guy prove himself that the liquids don't contain anything illegal by taking a few sips from his own bottles. The young man has no other choice but to go along with them. He knows what's really in the bottles, which is why his sips are so hesitant. The officers have already figured out what's in the bottles, but instead of following the standard protocol, they continue to playing his game. So, immediately after, the guy quickly tries to screw the cap back on. Agent Valia Rebirth tells him to take another sip. They are curious to see how far he is willing to go in his attempt to hide the truth. And at some point, they themselves go too far in this deadly game. Just 2 minutes after the first 2 sips, Officer Yadrin Perry, knowing it's dangerous for the teenager's health, suggests with a smile on his face that he take 2 more sips of the so-called apple juice. The guy realizes he has no way back now, but he also understands that each subsequent sip could be his last. So his sips become less and less confident. Nevertheless, he still tries to prove that the bottles contain nothing more than apple juice. The officers already know they won't let him go. They check his documents once again. At this moment, the first signs appear that the young man is unwell. He starts sweating profusely. His body begins to shake slightly, and he becomes increasingly nervous. Then the Customs Service conducts a personal search of the guy but finds nothing illegal in his clothes. However, they are sure he is clearly involved in something. Their final doubts are dispelled by a customs dog trained to find drugs. It signals that the young man had contact with illegal substances, after which the guy is handcuffed and taken to a security room for closer interrogation. By now, about half an hour has passed since the first sip from the bottle. The young man is led to the security desk to process the necessary paperwork, and everyone around finally begins to notice that something is clearly wrong with him. Officer Valerie Baird, the same woman who suggested the guy take the first sip, checks his body temperature, which by touch is found to be extremely high. The guy starts screaming loudly in Spanish, "My heart! My heart!" He begins to convulse violently, and he screams louder and louder in pain. And only now do the officers call medics for help. By the time the ambulance arrives, The young man's body temperature has reached 41 degrees Celsius, 105.8 degrees Fahrenheit. He is immediately taken to the nearest hospital, and there, roughly 2 hours after his first sip, the guy dies from a drug overdose. The substance in the bottles the guy was carrying indeed turned out to be methamphetamine. The 16-year-old Cruz had been recruited by the cartel very recently, and this was his first attempt at drug smuggling. Cartels specifically choose underage girls and boys for smuggling because, in case of capture at the border, they face only a few months in prison and subsequent deportation. Most likely, the guy wasn't afraid of that minor punishment, but of what awaited him back home if he failed the mission. That's why he decided to engage in this deadly game with the customs officers. Along with Cruz, his friend was also taken to the hospital. Also taken to the hospital was Officer Valerie Baird, who believed she also needed medical assistance because she had come into contact with a bottle containing methamphetamine. Ironically, she was in a room near Cruz's and heard all his death throes. Following this incident, an investigation was conducted. During the investigation, Valia Rebirth and Adrian Perry denied that they had suggested the guy take the lethally dangerous sips. They assured the investigators that he did it voluntarily. And despite the camera footage clearly showing otherwise, they faced no punishment for this incident. Meanwhile, Cruz's family described him as a smart and kind guy who simply fell in with the wrong crowd at some point. Later, they managed to secure a compensation of $1 million from the U.S. government for Cruz's death, which they believe happened due to the negligence of the customs officers. They believe the death of the 16-year-old lies entirely on the conscience of Officers Perry and Baird. But many believe the boy himself is to blame for his own death. And the root cause was not the choice he made at customs that day. He made his choice much earlier, when he decided to become part of the vast Mexican drug empire. Let me know, what are your thoughts on this? Did he deserve to die, or the police are to be blamed for his death?